9:30. Going live.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Center for Spiritual Living Rogue Valley in Medford, Oregon. I'm Kimberly Hawkins, Spiritual Director here, and I am so grateful that each one of you has decided to join us for this celebration. We honor you no matter where you happen to be on your own personal spiritual journey. We believe in one God, one source, many paths to get there. We are an open and affirming, inclusive spiritual community, and our mission is to teach spiritual tools to both transform personal lives and help make a world that works for everyone. With me this morning, I am pleased to introduce Laura Stewart, our practitioner and ministerial school student, who will be delivering our invocation and reading. And our musicians, Anton Miserak and Laura Berryhill, who now will offer our opening song.
There is only one of us. In your eyes it's me I see. There is only one of us. You are my reflection. There is only one. There is only one of us. In your eyes it's me I see. There is only one of us. You are my reflection. There is only one. There is only one of us. In your eyes it's me I see. There is only one of us. You are my reflection. There is only one. There is only one.
Knowing that there is only one power and one presence, one infinite intelligence that moves in, through, and as everything, for it is all that is. I know that it is showing up right here and right now as every single person in this room who's creating this service, every single person who is watching right here and right now, as well as those who will be watching in the future. I know that it is good and it is only good. For this, I am incredibly grateful. I let it go, I let it be, and together we say, and so it is. The reading that I've selected today is actually from today's Science of Mind magazine, written by Tracy Brown. Each of the more than 7 billion people on this planet has a direct relationship to God. But if every individual operated without coordination with others, nothing would ever be accomplished. The unity between God and people is oneness. Guided by oneness, we seek beneficial relationships. Those relationships can reflect either unity or duality, depending on what we do. The nature of God is unity. Therefore, my true essence, my true essential nature is also unity, and that is the truth of who you are. Why do we sometimes forget to treat every person we meet as our equal? Why do we sometimes create unnatural and unnecessary hierarchies to feel more secure? Why do we allow disparities to exist within our neighborhoods, workplaces, and societies? Why do we allow hatred and violence to prevail? Why do we turn our back on children or families who are struggling? Why do we believe each individual should be able to pull themselves up on their own when they typically did not get into a disadvantaged position solely because of their individual choices or actions? Why do we measure our success by comparing what we have to those who have less than us? Why do we forget that every other person is an equally valuable and important expression of God? Beginning today, let's break down the artificial barriers we have created. Let's create or expand intentional bridges between ourselves and people from different cultures, different age groups, different abilities, different professions. Beginning today, let's remember that the same intelligence that is in and as any one of us is all of us. My prayer today is that you know that truth of who and what you are, and that you see it in every single person and being around you. Namaste.
This is a piece I wrote maybe 18 years ago, not realizing that it would be more appropriate for today.
We are the crown of creation. Nature becoming conscious of herself, swimming in an ocean of sensation, discovering the vastness of our wealth. These times are times of great mystery. These times are times of great choice. As we answer the call of our own destiny, we must each speak our own truth with our own voice. And if there's one great light, we must find it all. And if there's one great peace, we must find it all. If there's a oneness in life, we must find it all in our hearts. These times are times of great trials. These times are times of great hope. These times may be times of personal struggle, but these times can be times of limitless growth. And And if there's one great light, we must find it all. And if there's one great peace, we must find it all. If there's a oneness in life, we must find it all in our hearts. Find it all in our hearts. Find it here in our hearts.
Indeed, a perfect song for these times and a perfect song for our message today. Thank you both so much. Ah, gorgeous. Coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous. That is a quote that is often attributed to Albert Einstein. The psychologist Carl Jung said, well, he coined a phrase, a word. He coined an expression called synchronicity. And he said synchronicity is when we have remarkable coincidences. In other words, two things that occur about the same time or simultaneously that have apparently no underlying union cause, but that happen and that have great meaning because they happen together. And I feel like this is something that is important both in how my talk came together this morning and in what I want to talk about today. There is divine order, is what Carl Jung believed. He believed there was an underlying order, an underlying oneness, what the quantum physicists nowadays call quantum consciousness, that connects everything and everyone. The topic for the month of August in Centers for Spiritual Living is inclusion in action. And the synchronistic part of all of this is that this topic was chosen almost a year ago, and the topics for each week were suggested by a committee within our organization, Centers for Spiritual Living, called the Diversity and Inclusion Commission. Now, when you think about it, inclusion in action, there couldn't be anything more appropriate, just as the song that Laura and Anton sang couldn't be more appropriate for today, when we're seeing the reemergence of the Black Lives Matter movement, when we're seeing many white-bodied people waking up to what people of color have long known, that there is great inequity still in our system. There is systemic racism still affecting and hurting many, many people of color. So this inclusion in action is really a perfect topic for this month of August. And I love the fact that we have a Diversity and Inclusion Commission in our organization, because if we're going to practice what we preach, and every week we talk about teaching spiritual tools for personal and global transformation, we're not going to help make a world that works for everyone unless we can learn to include everyone. So I'm proud of our organization and what we're doing and trying to do to make that world that works for everyone. Now, the other synchronistic thing that I think happened this week as we approach this topic is the beloved civil rights icon John Lewis made his transition off the planet. And wow, what an inspiration he was, and how much his life stood for inclusion in action, yes? I love the fact that he left an essay behind and sent it to the New York Times to be published as an op-ed on the day of his funeral. And once I read that, first of all, I was moved to tears, as I imagine some of you also were. I decided that it would be good to include a good portion of his essay this morning in this message. So bear with me while I read the words of beloved John Lewis, congressman for more than 30 years from Georgia. Someone who worked tirelessly from the freedom rides to sit-ins to the March on Washington and so many more instances where he fought for inclusion. In a nonviolent way, by the way. He starts his essay, "While my time here has now come to an end, I want you to know that in the last days and hours of my life, you inspired me. You filled me with hope about the next chapter of the great American story when you used your power to make a difference in our society. Millions of people, motivated simply by human compassion, laid down the burdens of division. Around the country and the world, you set aside race, class, age, language, and nationality to demand respect for human dignity. He goes on to talk about how Emmett Till was his George Floyd. Emmett Till, who was murdered, a racially motivated murder, at the age of 14 in Mississippi. At the time of boy, I'm getting tongue-tied this morning. At the time of Emmett Till's death, John Lewis was only 15. And Lewis wrote that he realized when that happened that he too, it could have happened to him. He writes, unchecked, unrestrained violence and government-sanctioned terror had the power to turn a simple stroll to the store for some Skittles or an innocent morning jog down a lonesome country road into a nightmare. If we are to survive as one unified nation, we must discover what so readily takes root in our hearts that could rob Mother Emanuel Church in South Carolina of her brightest and best, shoot unwitting concert-goers in Las Vegas, and choke to death the hopes and dreams of gifted violinists like Elijah McClain. Like so many young people today, Lewis writes, I was searching for a way out, or some might say, searching for a way in. And then he heard the voice of Dr. Martin Luther King on the radio, talking about nonviolent action. He said, says Lewis, King said, we are all complicit when we tolerate injustice. He said, it's not enough to say it will get better by and by. He said, each of us has a moral obligation to stand up, and speak out. When you see something that's not right, Lewis goes on to say, you must say something, you must do something. Democracy is not a state, it's an act. And each generation must do its part to help build what we called the beloved community, a nation and world society at peace with itself. Ordinary people with extraordinary vision can redeem the soul of America. What a great line. He talks about the vote being the most powerful nonviolent change agent we had and encourages us to use it. But he goes on to say, Lewis goes on to write, you must also study and learn the lessons of history, because humanity has been involved in this soul-wrenching existential struggle for a very long time. He encourages us to continue to build union between movements stretching across the globe, because we must put away our willingness to profit from the exploitation of others. He wraps up his essay by saying this, though I may not be here with you, I urge you to answer the highest calling of your heart and stand up for what you truly believe. In my life, I have done all I can to demonstrate that the way of peace, the way of love and nonviolence is the more excellent way. Now it is your turn to let freedom ring. When historians pick up their pens to write the story of the 21st century, let them say it was your generation who laid down the heavy burdens of hate at last, and that peace finally triumphed over violence, aggression, and war. So I say to you, walk with the wind, brothers and sisters, and let the spirit of peace and the power of everlasting love be your guide. Ooh, that's a lot to take in. Beloved John Lewis, rest in peace, rest in power, and may your example be a light that guides the way for those of us behind. He was certainly writing to inspire the next generation of people who work for inclusion in action. So oneness is very much a part of what we teach in Science of Mind, and oneness is certainly something John Lewis believed in. We believe it is a fact that God's spirit source is all there is, and so we are all children of the Most High. We are all interconnected. I do further inspiration for my message this morning from our book of the month, Everyday Ubuntu, Living Better Together the African Way. It was written by Mungi Ingomani, who happens to be the granddaughter of Archbishop Desmond Tutu. And I took the title for my talk this morning from the book. The title is Sawubona, Sawubona, spelled S-A-W-U, which is silent, B-O-N-A. Sawubona is a greeting, a South African greeting in the Zulu language. And it's used to just mean hi, hello. But the meaning of the word itself is, I see you. I see you. What a beautiful way to greet people. In other words, I see you not just physically. I see your spirit. I see God in me sees the God in you. I see myself in your eyes, like Laura and Anton sang in our opening song, you are my reflection. The other concept in the book, obviously because of the title, is the concept of Ubuntu, which is a South African notion. Actually, the word Ubuntu means humanity. And the idea of Ubuntu then is I am because you are. As the author writes, her grandfather, Desmond Tutu, talked about, we are all inextricably interrelated, interconnected. And Ubuntu teaches us the importance of remembering humanity and community over our individual concerns, not just ourselves, but to think about how our actions affect others. Now, another coincidence this week, and I love it when this happens, is my housemate Vivian and I, at random, picked up a DVD I had at the house of the movie Avatar. I'm sure many of you have seen it. It's like 11 years old now, James Cameron's beautiful work. And I had forgotten, maybe some of you remember, that on this fictional planet named Pandora, the Na'vi people, remember the big, tall, strong humanoid species that were blue, they greeted each other with, in their language, a phrase that meant, I see you. And Sigourney Weaver's character, she played a scientist in the movie, taught the other people on the crew that this, again, didn't just mean I see you, but it meant I see into you. I see your goodness. I see inside your soul. I understand you and how we are connected. I see the love and your feelings and your soul, and you mean everything to me. How beautiful. It was reminiscent for me of a recent visit last year I made to Shasta Abbey, a Buddhist community in the Mount Shasta area. And I remember talking in one of my messages about how moved I was as this beautiful minister gave us a tour of the Abbey. And each time we passed someone else who was at work in the kitchen or in the garden, he silently did this, bowed in the Anjali Mudra, which just means I reverence you. I bow to you. Traditionally in India, this goes along with the greeting Namaste, which means the divine in me sees the divine in you. And that phrase became very meaningful to me because when my sister, Reverend Dr. Kristen Hawkins, began a CSL church in Long Beach, California, she chose Namaste as the name of the community. Many of you met Kristen a few weeks back when we had a live service in the park. And Reverend Bobby Becker was there too, who is now the senior minister at Namaste Center for Spiritual Living. But what I noticed when I listened to one of their services online, I love that we can listen to many services online now, I noticed they're still reading one of the, I don't know what to call it, the descriptions that Kristen adapted when the community began back in 1998, I think it was, or 99. And I'd like to read it to you. It's brief. I honor the place in you in which the entire universe dwells. I honor the place in you which is love, truth, light, and peace. When you are in that place in you, and I am in that place in me, we recognize that we are one. Namaste. And it's interesting that it says, when I am in that place in me, and you are in that place with you. And so we only can actually see the divinity in others if we have acknowledged and are willing to see the divinity, the perfection in us. We may be separate physical beings, Namaste tells us, but we're actually shared an interconnected or universal consciousness. And I have to get to the next page of my little outline so I know where I'm going here. So back to this idea of Ubuntu. This idea and practice, says Mungi Ngomani in our book of the month, she says it's Africans' greatest gift to the world, although not everybody understands it. She said her grandfather, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, said this proverb that goes along with the concept of Ubuntu: a person is a person through other persons. In other words, none of us grows up in a vacuum. Our lives, as much as we may feel like we're self-made, and that in the West is kind of a badge of honor that we wear, nobody does their life alone. And if we think about it, all of us had significant people who helped us, perhaps our parents or a mentor, a teacher, a friend, that helped shape who we are. And it's through relationship that we learn and grow and become our true selves. It's a beautiful concept. And once again, since everything's connected, we have to examine our words and our actions, not just for what they will help us achieve personally, but for how they affect everyone else in our lives and the rest of the world. So Ubuntu embraces our differences and celebrates them. And it also teaches that judging others shuts us down. It shuts us off from our heart, from our connection, from our compassion. And we all know this. We really do. We sense this. Studies, scientific studies actually speak to this. For instance, the idea that wealth creates happiness, that personal wealth and power create happiness, is nonsense. According to a study from UC Berkeley, it was a study done in San Francisco where cars are supposed to stop and let pedestrians cross at a crossing. What the study found, interesting, was that drivers of luxury cars were 4 times less likely to give way to pedestrians than those in less expensive vehicles. And a study out of Brigham Young University found that loneliness increases the risk of mortality by 26%. I think we intuitively know this too. We need connection. In 2018, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom actually created a post called the Minister of Loneliness to combat this issue in the United Kingdom, to tackle the problem. Now, this notion of Ubuntu, in a very, very sacred way, guided the struggle to end apartheid in South Africa, which is truly, to me, quite an accomplishment. Up until 1994, as you probably know, there was a strict, rigid system of racial oppression and segregation in South Africa. White people, too, the author of our book writes, were impacted. They were imprisoned in a way, too, because they were in their enclaves, their gated communities, building high walls to keep out the blacks and living in fear of violence. Well, surely, you know, when one group of a population is oppressed and kept out of the loop, there's anger and there's revenge and there is violence. So when Nelson Mandela moved in to leadership and he was really given the charge of healing the country, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was established. Desmond Tutu headed it up. And instead of doing Nuremberg-like trials that we experienced at the end of World War II, where people were sent to prison or whatever, punished, which the author of Everyday Ubuntu said helped create more anger and more of a desire for revenge. Instead of doing that, what the Truth and Reconciliation Commission did was they brought people together in every single village to talk to one another, to share their experiences from both sides, black and white, oppressor and oppressed, to really speak to their experience. In other words, practicing, I see you, I listen to you, I'm hearing you. And the commission was given the power to pardon anyone who was guilty of a crime if it was determined that the crime was due to political reasons, you know, because of the terribly divided situation in the country. It was encouraged, forgiveness was encouraged but not required. And boy, there was a healing. The idea was to purge the poison of all of the acrimony and oppression and hatred and fear that existed between the two races. One example, I think, is a poignant example of this, is the story of a young woman named Amy Beale. Amy was on a Fulbright scholarship when she was a young student in South Africa, studying and working in the anti-apartheid movement. By the way, this was not an anti-white movement by any stretch of the imagination. It was simply a movement that was designed to have all South Africans treated equally. But Amy Beale was driving in her car one day with 3 black friends with her. When they were stopped, she was dragged from the car, beaten severely, stoned to death. She was murdered. 4 black men were arrested and convicted of murder, sent to prison. And during the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, they were pardoned. And one might think, ooh, ouch. However, Amy Beale's family, her parents, supported that move. Not only did they support that move, but they began to work with the families of these young men to build a nonprofit to teach and effectively manage to create nonviolent communication, nonviolence. Mungi Ingomani in the book mentions that in 2015, several years later, Linda Beale, Laura's mom, was speaking at a conference on restorative justice at Whittier College alongside one of her daughter's murderers. And she shared that she came to realize that these young men were not responsible for her daughter's death. What was responsible was the dehumanization of black people, which allowed a young black man to dehumanize a white person because of what had happened. And so we're all connected, you know? And when we can see each other, when we can hear each other, healing happens. Coming together happens. Now, another concept in the book, which I love, is something that I'll call shoe shifting. Not shape shifting, but shoe shifting. So we've all heard the expression, you know, if you walk in someone else's shoes, you begin to understand their perspective. We've heard the expression, walk a mile in someone's moccasins, right? And that expression actually does not come from the Native American tradition, as it's often purported to have. It comes from a poem that was written back in 1895 by someone named Mary Lathrop, and I'd like to read you part of that poem. The poem was originally entitled Judge Softly. I think now it's often referred to as, you know, walk a mile in your moccasins. So Mary Lathrop wrote, "Don't be too harsh with the man that sins, or pelt him with words or stone or disdain. Unless you are sure you have no sins of your own, and it's only wisdom and love that your heart contains. Just walk a mile in his moccasins before you abuse, criticize, and accuse. If just for 1 hour you could find a way to see through his eyes instead of your own muse, I believe you'd be surprised to see that you've been blind and narrow-minded, even unkind. There are people on reservations and in the ghettos who have so little hope and too much worry on their minds. Brother, there but for the grace of God go you and I, just for a moment slip into his mind and traditions and see the world through his spirit and eyes before you cast a stone or falsely judge his conditions. Remember to walk a mile in his moccasins, and remember the lessons of humanity taught by our elders. We will be known forever by the tracks we leave in other people's lives, our kindnesses and generosity. Take the time to walk a mile in his moccasins." Oh boy, it's a powerful message. So as we go forward in this month where we're talking about inclusion in action, I'm going to offer some advice that comes from this book, Ubuntu, Everyday Ubuntu. How do we practice this principle of oneness, of kindness every day? Shoe shifting is one way. To try to understand where someone else is coming from. Even if we don't agree with them, we can ask questions, we can listen, and begin to understand what experiences may have shaped what their actions are, their beliefs are today. Walking a mile in their moccasins, if you will. Considering the shoes we're wearing. You know, what has shaped our views and our beliefs, and if we're so sure we're right, can we open up to a broader perspective and allow that there may be other ways of viewing the situation? Remembering the beautiful advice of John Lewis, ordinary people with extraordinary vision can redeem the soul of America. Stand up, and speak out. Let's be inclusion in action. There were 2 other stories that I meant to tell, which I think I'm going to backtrack a bit and tell, in terms of seeing the other person's point of view. when Mungi was studying abroad in Australia. I can't remember the town. She was living in a house full of both young students, male and female. And when a friend was visiting, the friend had some jewelry disappear, stolen. Mungi said she was angry. Mungi was angry, and she felt betrayed that one of her housemates would do such a thing. And she wanted to go confront the girl that she thought had done it. And what she did instead was wise. She called her mom. And her mom said, yeah, you need to talk to the people. You need to confront, but you need to calm down before you do it. So Mungi did take some time to calm down. Eventually got all the girls that lived in the house together to talk. And as it turns out, the girl who she suspected had stolen the jewelry confessed to doing it. She also confessed that she had been suffering from impulse disorder and bulimia. And the fact that she was away from her family and support system had exacerbated her suffering. And so when this all came out, it gave the housemates an opportunity to support her. They had no opportunity to practice Ubuntu if they didn't realize what was going on with her. And Mungi said, I was so grateful that I took my mother's advice, because instead of confronting and adding more suffering to someone who was already suffering, we were able to see her perspective, to see her, to walk in her shoes, to understand, and to be able to support her. Mungi was involved in and may still be, a foundation called the Tutu Foundation in the United Kingdom, which was designed to teach about Ubuntu, particularly to young men, in the hopes of helping the relationship between young men and the police in the United Kingdom. She said one day, a young man showed up to the morning session on Ubuntu with a bandage on his neck. And one of the youth workers asked him what happened, expecting that he'd be angry and wanting to take revenge, right? Instead, he explained that he had been stabbed by another young man in the projects where he lived, and he needed stitches. But he said to the youth worker this. He said, I'm okay. I'm hurt, but I've decided not to hold a grudge, because I have no idea what the guy who did this was going through that day. He could be facing all kinds of things I know nothing about, and maybe he just lost it that morning. What a generous view. So this young man, to the surprise of everybody at that workshop that morning, had made the choice to walk in the other young man's shoes. He made the choice to practice Ubuntu. Yes. So my friends, that's quite a gauntlet I think I have put out, from the likes of John Lewis, the likes of this young man, the likes of all those who participated in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa. And I would offer, I don't know where I got this idea this week, but in a sense, I think we had a system we could almost call de facto apartheid in this country in the South in the years of Jim Crow following the Civil War. We had a situation where voters of color were put to ridiculous tests of literacy before they could vote, where people were not allowed to have loans on the same level as white people. There were so many things in place, and this is still going on to some extent. So I'm hoping that this new opportunity, as Laura and Anton sang about, this new challenging period in our history is also a new opportunity for us to practice, I see you. Namaste. I see your spiritual essence. I am willing to listen to you. I am willing to walk in your moccasins and understand you, so that we might live together in peace, in brotherhood, in sisterhood. And so I say to you, I see you. Namaste. Let's go into prayer. Interconnectedness, oneness, which teaches us there really is one life living itself as each of us on this planet. One life, one power, one presence. It goes by many, many names. Atman, God, Spirit, Source, Father, Mother, God, Goddess, the ground of all being. It doesn't matter what we call it. What we know is that it's everywhere presence, and it is a presence of good, of goodness, of love, unconditional love, infinite abundance. It's also expressing itself in so much diversity, which is not sameness, but a sameness in terms of our origins, our essence, the fact that we are love incarnate, each person on the planet, whether we're acting that way or not. And as such, we are one. We are, as Desmond Tutu said, inextricably connected. We are brothers and sisters of the Most High. And so my prayer right now is that at this point in history, this critical point in history, we come together, all of us, we come together with a willingness to listen, a willingness to be compassionate, a willingness to see our reflection in the eyes of another person, even if we're disagreeing, even if they've hurt us. To raise each other up, to support each other, to educate ourselves, as John Lewis encouraged us, about what is happening, about the history in this country between people who are different on the surface. That we might truly experience peace within and peace without, that we might truly create a world that works for everyone. I know it's possible. I know John Lewis believed it's possible. I know he spent his life dedicated to making sure it was. And I accept the gauntlet that he threw down, that we're here to speak up, speak out, to act, to be inclusion in action, to celebrate the diversity that exists, to be at one. I know we can do this. And I pray that each of us is guided by listening within about what is ours to do. I pray that our government leaders in this country and across the globe are guided by that principle of Ubuntu. And as we practice everyday Ubuntu, we bring about a beautiful world, a beautiful connection where no one has to be deprived of being, as John Lewis said, inside, moving in, being part of the circle of life. In great gratitude for the life of John Lewis, for this amazing philosophy called Science of Mind, and gratitude for all the spiritual traditions across the globe that also believe in this idea of namaste, of I see you. By the way, aloha in Hawaiian, I understand, also means I honor you. I see you. I know we can do this. I give thanks to know this. And in gratitude for this opportunity to be together, I just release this word into the heart of God, knowing this prayer is heard, it's answered, and we say together, and so it is. Amen. Here. This is Ubuntu in action, okay? I got a little lost, but my colleagues in the room helped me out. We have a treat for you today. Instead of a song, we have a music video that was created recently by artists Jamie Lula and Gary Lynn Floyd. They're together, their dual partnership is called Floyd Lula. And I believe it's called Take a Knee, Take a Hand, Take a Knee. So in the spirit of Ubuntu, in the spirit of this wonderful movement that's happening in this country, let's watch and listen to this song, this music video by Floyd Lula.
Take a hand, take a knee, till everybody is free. No inequality, we owe apologies. Take a stand, make a choice, let every human rejoice. A word, shout, scream, or noise, let freedom ring in their voice. From deep within it comes, in every one of us. One and all in one, a new day strong anthem we sing. We stand together on the brink. Love and peace take wing. Let equality ring. Take a moment and breathe. Nothing is what it seems. No one's living beneath another human being. From deep within it comes in every one of us. One and all in one. A new day's dawning. We are one in the spirit of love. Let it ride, let it ring. Hear freedom calling. We are one in the spirit of love. If fear is running your mind, leave your weapons behind. Anger's leaving us blind. Come together in kind with one another, yeah. One and all in one. A new day's dawning. We are one in the spirit of love. Let it ride, let it ring. Hear freedom calling. We are one in the spirit of love. One and all in one. A new day's dawning. We are one in the spirit of love. Let it ride, let it ring. Hear freedom calling. We are one in the spirit of love. Let it ride, let it ring. We are one in the spirit. Let it ride, let it ring.
Big thanks to Gary Lynn Floyd and Jamie Lula for sharing that beautiful, beautiful music video. Take a hand, take a knee. Now it's time in our service when we speak about another spiritual practice called sacred giving. This is a practice that allows us to be fully conscious of all the good that comes into our lives and to be willing to share a portion of it to those places where we are spiritually fed. So big thanks to those of you who have continued to support us through the pandemic and our inability to meet in person most Sundays. And I invite you to take your gift, even metaphorically, and place it over your heart, wherever your gift is going and whatever the amount. We like to say this affirmation: divine love as me blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, and all that I choose to give. Pressed down, shaken together, and running over, and so it is. There are several ways to give to Center for Spiritual Living Rogue Valley. You can mail us a check at P.O. Box 1458, Medford, Oregon, 97501. That's CSL RV for short, Center for Spiritual Living Rogue Valley. You can go to our website, hit the donate button, and give there. A few announcements as we move to close our service. We are continuing our morning spiritual practice calls, but beginning this week, they're 3 days a week only: Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 9 to 9:30 a.m. There is a new link, and it's in our newsletter, which comes out each Wednesday. If you're not on the newsletter list but would like to be, you see a spot on Facebook where you can join our email list. Please do so. We'd love to connect with you. And a couple other events coming up. This coming Wednesday, August 5th at 7 p.m., we're doing a community meeting town hall style through Zoom. And again, the link to that will be in our newsletter. It was in last week's newsletter, 7 p.m. this Wednesday evening. And we're excited to tell you that on August 21st, 23rd, we, by popular demand, have organized another service live in person in Bear Creek Park at the amphitheater in Medford. If you're able to join us live, we will also broadcast the service. But bring a long chair, bring your mask, and Lauren Anton will be there with us, and we're going to have a great time to see each other, socially distanced and safe. So I think it's time now for our closing song before we wrap this up. Lauren Anton.
Light your lamp and pass it on. Let it shine for everyone, so we all may know and we all may see that we are one great family. Light your lamp and pass it on. Let it shine for everyone, so we all may know and we all may see that we are one great family.
We are indeed one great family. In the words of John Lewis, walk with the wind, brothers and sister, and let the spirit of peace and the power of everlasting love be your guide. Sawubona, I see you. Aloha, namaste.